Jacob, see you again. Then we're going to go ahead and get started. All right, I'd like to welcome you guys to Industry Insight. Today we have a great guest, Crystal Saldana. She's going to be giving us some great advice on being an independent artist, some ins and outs, and just give us some of her expertise. So we're going to get started by saying, of course, hello, Crystal. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Hey, what's going on?
Yeah, we appreciate you and the knowledge and care you're going to share with us ahead of time. So if you don't mind, just give us an introduction. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah. I'm Crystal. I'm originally from Dallas. From there, I lived a little bit in other places. I played D1 basketball at New Mexico State, moved to Spain for a little bit, Austin, Chicago, now LA. I got into music. Prior to that, I was in casting. From there, I went freelancing for agents and helping their clients strategize and monetize with opportunities. When they would want to pivot and monetize off of that, I would kind of help them create that without ignoring their original audience. And a lot of the meetings, I kind of saw how the suits were kind of unethically guiding their clients. And I have a lot of friends in the music industry, and they kind of just told me, take your business and your strategy mindset and kind of do your own thing. And so I did. And then that's when I started Name Media Management, got a couple clients, consult for some people in terms of strategizing for their artists, and especially with COVID, learning how to pivot and monetize off of an industry that is, for artists, all the money is in touring. Like that has completely subsided, and it's basically how do you strategize and get your musicians paid. So it was kind of like perfect timing in terms of, with all things said, obviously like COVID sucks, but in terms of what I'm good at in terms of business development and strategy, it's really helped me and my artists along the way. So it's kind of a summary of how I got to where I am and what I do.
Thank you very much for sharing that. It's people never know all the steps it takes to kind of someone to get somewhere. And you have a very interesting story already. You have quite a few experiences. So
yeah.
I know your information has some life and some guidance to it. So, all right. So feel free. You can take us into your presentation, and we'll go ahead and open our ears.
Yeah. Share the screen right quick. Awesome. Okay, so basically this is just going to be the 101s of how to be, or how to successfully kind of route your success within being a DIY artist or an indie artist. What exactly is an independent artist and what does that mean? When someone says indie, it means you're not part of a label. When people say that, when you have music that goes out or it's successful, people understand that it garnered that success without any label backing. No, none of the labels, marketings, the promotions, the advances, all of that. And it was very much you and usually your managers, and then obviously your distribution that you work with. And then I'll talk on distribution later. Sometimes it's also used for a form of marketing. For example, I'm with one of my artists, we are working on sync placements, and I'm gonna go on that later because obviously sync placements is a really good way to get your artists paid, especially with touring done. With sync placements, you can get anywhere from $10,000 to $150,000 per placement, depending if it's on TV, commercial, like a trailer. It's all dependent on that. So right now, my strategy is focusing on syncing them. And so when they reach out to me, they ask me, they're like, are they indie? Because when they hear indie, they know that there's not going to be any circumstances where there's going to be any publishing issues, because they typically don't want any third-party publishers that they can just use the music, sync it to their projects, and then that's it. So that's what I mean when I write used as a marketing term. But so this graph right here is basically 360 deal is fine in its own sense, just because if you are any type of a decent manager, you would never let your person sign a 360 deal. That's basically how people get stuck into these deals for like 20 or 30 years. And if you look at the graph on the right, it says 24% to distributors. And if you're signed with a label, that 24% is signed in with that 63%. And so that essentially is, you don't get any of that revenue. And I don't have the graph on here, and I should have, but I'm going to kind of explain it. So we're going to have two artists. One's going to be an indie and one's going to be a label. And let's say you're with the label and you have $1 million advance and they give you $1 million to put out your project. And that project, you get $5 million back. So before you get any of that revenue, you have to pay back that advance. So you're already at $4 million. And so look at that graph, that's 63-24, but I used 84%. So 84% of that money you have to give back to the label. So that's $3,360,000 that you have to give back in label fees. So now you're down to only $640,000. And then you have your manager fee, which is 20%, your producer fee, which is 20%, and then you have your business manager, which is like your accountant, that's 5%. Then you have your lawyer costs, and you're basically down to $320,000 of the $5 million that your project brought in. And if you're in a band of 4 people, you have to split that up 4 different ways, and that means you're only down, you're $80,000. You each have $80,000 to your name after your project brought in $5 million, and that is signed to a label. And again, all contracts are different. I just did these numbers because it's easier. The math percentages are different. Some are 15, 20, 25. But anyway, that's just for basic math. Indie label, I did $3 million just to be fair, because when you see the outcome, you're going to see basically how crazy it is. So say you're the indie and you put out the same amount and you get $3 million in return. So you're gonna have a distribution, and I'm gonna go over that later. You have tons. You have like CD Baby, which is super popular. We'll use them for example. And it's 10% distribution, and that's usually, they are basically getting all your music to the DSPs and getting your royalties. And again, I'll go down that later. But that's 10%, that's $300,000. The manager fees, 20%, production fee, 20%, that's $600,000, and you're left with $1.5 million. And that's already, you already brought in $2 million less than the person that's signed to the label, and you have $1.5 million to your name. And if you do have a band of 4, you divide that by 4. And that's just like night and day. And say the numbers were the same. Say that, okay, you did $3 million, and then your next project, you're kind of well more known, and you went from an EP, now you're putting out an LP, and you do $5 million. Like, that's already like $3.5 million opposed to the person with the label. And the label scenario where I'm saying they make $80,000 each, that's on a good day. A lot of times these artists, they get in the red, like they don't even come out with, because there's a lot of double dipping involved, and I'll kind of cover that as well a little later on. But that's how they kind of get double signed. So that, okay, well, you still owe me $100,000. So then we're going to renew your contract, and I'm going to give you a $2 million advance this time to work on your project. And then XYZ, you're going to have your contract. So then with the original project that came out that they put out with $5 million, and then they're in the red. So let's pretend they didn't make 80,000 each. Let's say they were in the red 80,000. That's when they sign the new deal and be like, okay, well, I still owe the label, and I can't make any more music until I pay that label back. So I might as well take this $2 million advance and work on the next project and use their resource. And then a lot of times it is just it's a snowball effect. And that's how, okay, second project, same thing, sign another advance, sign another thing. And that's how you hear about these horror stories of people in these contracts for just like endless amount of time. You look at like Kesha, and then you look at like Taylor Swift in terms of like owning her music. That's a whole other, these are just nightmare types of contracts that you hear about. But in this example, this is kind of like a nightmare in terms of not getting what you're worth, as well as 9 times out of 10, you're not even owning the copyright of your music, because if you're signed to a label, they're going to have obviously you with the publisher if you are a writer. And that's like a whole other thing, and we'll touch a little bit later.
Okay, Crystal, can I ask a question real quick?
Yeah.
Okay, so thank you for that breakdown. So I'm hearing the difference between the indie deal and the other route. So what's the difference in quantity? Like, do we expect, I know you're saying you make more money in the end from the indie deal. So do we expect like a lower volume? Like what's the relationship between those two? And I guess
so with the label, obviously you're going to have a lot of in-house resources like your marketing, your PR, your social media person, just all of this stuff. The thing about being an indie artist, it's very entrepreneurial. You're basically doing all the work that the label is essentially doing for you. But there's so many of these resources that are available to you for free or for a commission or for a small fee that you can do that. So for instance, like your PROs, your pros, there's a lot of them that offer like, for example, splitting, and they offer label type of services. And when you decide where in your career you are, where you want to be, you can, research what they all have to offer. And if you're looking for something that has more label type services, they usually offer just a commission or for a fee if you do by like a contract. So if you're looking at the label deal and you're like, okay, well, if you're taking 84%, okay, fine, you're doing all like my touring and you're doing all my promos and you're doing all my bookings and you're doing all my social media, XYZ, that you can get like the promos and the syncing and all that in terms of label services type of stuff with these pros. But then that also goes into finding a manager, like if you're at that point, and I'm going to discuss about that later, of how to find a good manager and basically how you guys pick and roll, because you guys are going to have to wear multiple hats. Because as an indie artist, you have to know how to be a booking person. You need to know how to book your tours. You need to know what cities to book your tours in. Same thing, like for example, like the Shazam effect. I'll go into that later, but when people book tours, you can kind of go like, okay, I'm going to go to Austin. Which one of our songs was Shazam the most in Austin? And within that data, you can collectively decide how you're going to book your tours within each city to increase popularity and ticket sales. And then within that count, that kind of takes you to the next level as an independent artist. That will then, like, you'll get bigger venues. And that's something that you're going to work with yourself and your manager. But it's a lot of like hands-on work in comparison to label deals, but it's kind of your decision. Do you want to be really involved with your music, or do you just want to be like, okay, I'm going to be in the studio, and have the label services do their label services, but is it really is it worth 84% of your income is basically what you want to decide. And I feel like that's definitely not worth it. If you're getting 5 million in and you're only walking away with, say, you're just a solo artist, $320,000, that just doesn't sound right. So it's just like, are you ready to kind of just learn the steps? Like all the musicians, it's a lot of resources online as well. So it's basically, you are your label service, and you teach yourself how to do that. And then when you're ready for a manager, you should, have someone on your team very like business minded and understands like digital marketing, promotions, and all of that good stuff. So basically, yeah, that's the difference. It's basically do no work, but get rid of 84% of your income, or do the work and just get rid of maybe 25% of your income in terms of like percentages and fees that you distribute to your PROs and administrators and stuff like that.
Okay. Thank you for that. Sorry, not to take you aside, but
no, you're good. That's a good question. So the next slide, this is basically kind of piggybacking on the end of that conversation, was learn the business. And that is successful as an independent artist, because learning the business, you have to know the back end. You have to as a musician, you know what it is to create, but to be a successful indie artist, you kind of have to reverse engineer the entire industry, essentially. So it's like, say your goal is, and what I mean about reverse engineering is if you want to get playlisted, what do you need to do in order to be playlisted? Okay, people need to know about you. Playlists need to know about you. What do you need to do in terms of that awareness? You got to promote, you got to market. How do you do that? Okay, how do I do that? You probably have to release some music and do all that, create a website. There's just so much that goes into it. But yeah, learning the business is like prime, because again, people are signed to label deals, and what labels do, they are doing the business part of it. But again, it's not worth 84% of your revenue. It just doesn't make sense. So in terms of learning the business, really understand the vernacular that's used. So for instance, like the distribution, imprints versus labels, performing rights organizations, also known as the pros, mechanical royalties, how do you get that place? And a lot of people get mistaken with, say you're signed with BMI, they think that they are taking case, but that is only for public performances. They don't collect your royalties. So there's about 1% of like uncollected mechanical, a ton of money, mechanical royalties, things licensed out, for instance, like television. So a lot of like the labels, they'll send out like blanket licensing is what it's called. And they'll just blanket license, let's say a TV network, and be like, okay, we'll give you a blanket license to all of our catalog. And when I say catalog, they own that entire catalog because you're signed with the label, right? So everything under this label that you're signed, that you own 84% to, or in terms of dues, all of that catalog, all the people signed to that label, all of that is the label's catalog. And they blanket license that to the television network rather than doing individual syncing. So if you're an indie artist, you're gonna be doing individual sync licensing to people, that anyone that wants to use the rights to your music, like in terms of sync placements for a commercial or a television show, a trailer, for example, you're individually gonna license out your music song by song, or as in, again, the labels just do it all in bulk. They'll do a blanket license and they can literally have all control over your music. So reading the fine print is super important in terms of that. Publishing deals, again, like there's a lot of resources online. I get it. A lot of songwriters, they want to be signed and get a publishing deal, but they own 100% of your copyrights of your music. And again, going back to earlier to the Taylor Swift stuff, when Scooter Braun, he acquired that and didn't allow her to use her music essentially for her documentary. That is because she was in a publishing deal. She didn't even have a co-publishing deal or co-publishing deal. You own 50% of your copyrights at least. And a full publishing deal is 100% of the rights go to your publisher. And there's just nightmares of that all over the internet. And again, just kind of, it's a lot of complex information. And if you just like scour the internet, you're just going to go in a rabbit hole. But being informed is super, super important. I read articles daily, and I'm currently always learning something because, there's just so much intricacies within this, but reading the fine print is like super important. But yeah, definitely understanding the vernacular that the suits in the industry use is super important. What else? What's next? Yeah, so building your team. So this is going back to a little bit earlier, I was discussing your manager, how to build your team. So when you're an artist and you want to be an artist, if you're 13, 12, 18, whatever, and you know that you probably don't need a manager yet, you're slowly getting in the game, you kind of create your own site map, figure out that you want to be an artist, a producer, engineer, songwriter, whatever it is, figure it out, and then do the footwork that you need to get to, and say that you're kind of like getting some traction, then obviously the next step is probably going to be a manager. What a lot of people do wrong, and I'm not saying don't not hire a family member or cousin or whatever to be your manager. Just make sure that they are literally in tune with the business, and they don't have to be in music business, but like say if they are aware of some sort of business, then, you know, that's good. But I have friends who have had friends as managers, and they're just the homies. They just want to stick out in the studio, hang out, kick it, but then nothing gets done. They just kind of want the role of that manager thing, just go to the shows and X, Y, Z. But if you really want to be successful as an independent artist, your manager has to be aware of all the things within the business and how to wear multiple hats and how to take one off and exchange it for another. So for me, it's like, I mean, I do have a background in business and strategy and advertising. So for me, if I'm reaching out to like press and media, it's like, oh, okay, like I've got to put on my PR hat. If I got to get awareness, I was like, okay, I got to put on my digital marketer hat. If I got to, you know, do promoter stuff, like I got, you know, I just have to do a little bit of everything. Like I have to help him. But my artists are also very much involved because they obviously want to succeed. So for instance, like I have 97 emails I need to send out to different press stuff. And he's like, okay, well, while you're doing that, like he has his own like itinerary because he's also wearing multiple hats. Because there's a lot of people that feel in order to, I guess, feel like an artist, they have to have a team. They have to have a publicist. They have to have a manager. They have a booking agent. They have to have a tour manager. And that's not the case because you don't need that, at least not yet. So like definitely build your team in order that makes sense, as well as make sure as it's a strong team. Someone that's definitely going to work as hard on your music as you are on your own music. So definitely marketing or a manager. And after that, I would say would definitely be a PR person. So say, you know, you're getting to the next level and your manager is just kind of like swamped because he or she's doing everything. And then you're swamped making music, doing photo shoots, music videos, or whatever it is on the creative end that you're doing with you and, you know, your creative team. You know, the next thing would obviously be PR because you can be making all the music and all the visuals for it, but it wouldn't really matter if no one knows about it. So obviously PR marketing would be your next person above a manager. So when I say, you know, build your team, build it smart and do it in chronological order that makes sense to you and your career. Like don't try to get a full team and, you know, you don't even have, like, you know, you're not Drake yet. You don't need a full team, basically is the best way I can explain it. But yeah, if you guys have any questions on that, just drop that down. So
Take a really quick on something.
Yeah.
Because a lot of we deal with a lot of youth, and this is somewhat related, but maybe kind of tangible as well. So we're talking to them about kind of different roles and things they're prepping for. So if people are young and let's say they have a crew of people they're growing up with, we're doing this here. If somebody was young and wanted to start to learn about, you know, the business or PR, so that they can kind of grow together as, you know, as a young group of people, you know, to be able to train to do that. You know, have you ever seen that? If they did that, how would you recommend they start?
No, absolutely. Yeah, no, that happens all the time. The best way to do it, like I've seen some people, you know, obviously it all starts from a mutual interest of something. In this certain instance, it's obviously music. So they're going to come together. You're going to talk about it. Like, let's say, for instance, you want to make a band and you're like a freshman in high school and you have friends that want to make a band. You're going to obviously meet at one's house and you're going to, you know, what do you want to do? Do you want to be a lead singer? Do you want to be a drummer, X, Y, Z? Or let's say you're just an artist, but then you have a friend that's like, oh, okay, like I would love to be in music business. I don't want to be an artist, but, you know, I would love to be behind the scenes. And I think you're a talented singer. You can kind of create a mood board together and kind of like site map that. And again, reverse engineer it, and writing it down is the best way to do it. that I feel like that's also why certain songwriters are so good. They just write everything down, obviously. But in terms of like starting young, it's definitely write it down. Write down what you want to do. If you want to be in music business, if you want to be a manager or an indie artist, and you have a friend that wants to be in music with you, you know, just feed off of each other's ideas, like your brains, like what is it that you want to do, and then just piggyback off those ideas. Like, you know, ideas are just built off of each other. That's how like some of the greatest songs were created. Some of the best bands are created, you know? So it's definitely like a collaborative role between everyone in your circle that has like that same insight of where you guys want to be in terms of like the music business.
Well, thank you.
Yeah. So the important no's. So as I was talking about earlier, distribution is basically, there's so many resources online that this alone can like you don't need a label with all the distribution out there like that. I think I actually added it on the resource page. There's a ton, like on our Stake, from AWOL, CD Baby, like TuneCore, there is a ton. Basically, to cut that short, because I could talk on this all day, is the best way. Say even, you know, you're in high school and you are playing around in your bedroom studio, like Billie Eilish, for example. She was 14 when she put out Ocean Eyes. You know, you go to a distribution site, see, you kind of study them and see what's best. And for me, I would say, look at the companies and see which one offer payment splitting, which is if it's you and a producer and you have like a featured artist, it automatically splits up the royalties and it pays them. Administration, so they will help you collect your royalties, not just your, so all the royalties, not just what the pros have, like, but also like your mechanical royalties. Because if you go through administration somewhere else, you're going to have to pay another commission or another fee. So look at these distribution companies and see what, you know, makes the most sense in terms of like resources offered. And especially being young, like the less paperwork, the easier it's going to be, where you can just like make a song, go in, upload it, and do like literally just a one sheet of your song, the credits, and then fill out that profile. And then all you have to do is just sit back and then wait for everything to get listed on the DSPs. So definitely do your research on that. And some have zero commissions, some have zero fees, some have fees, but a percentage on commission on your royalties. Again, it's all dependent, but definitely distribution is huge. That's going to be like your best friend in terms of avoiding a label deal if you want to remain indie, which again, both of my guys are. Performing rights organizations, that's ASCAP, BMI. I kind of talked about that earlier. Again, study up on those. There's so much complexities within that. It gets super confusing, but learn, again, it's just learning the vernacular in the business to really, you have to know that in order to maneuver the right way. And again, educating yourself super young, like it's literally going to be like, it's going to help a lot. And admins, same thing. When you see admins, it's going to be the administrations that collect royalties that the PROs don't. So the PROs, they just focus on the royalties on like public plays, so like streaming, Spotify, stuff like that. The admins, as I said before, they focus on mechanical royalties and all the other royalties in terms of like where your music's being played. And that's when I stated about 51% of mechanical royalties go unpaid, because a lot of people just assume that the PROs are going to get all the royalties, but that is not the case. So again, just look into those. And I already touched up on publishing and the co-publishing. With your music, if you're a songwriter, just know is automatic, like before even reading a contract, you're not going to own any of your music, period. And that goes back to your distributors. They offer things where, you literally own 100% of your work. So I would completely advise against, signing a publishing deal, especially when you're becoming an independent artist, because the resources, like for instance, CD Baby's great, AWOL, those are great companies, and then blanket licenses I kind of covered earlier.
A quick question before you go on really quick. You told us what study. Can you give us a couple examples of how to study those things? How would somebody go about, looking up performance rights?
Yeah. So at the very end of the slides, if you guys are on the computer, I would say take a screenshot of your screen. Those slides, are great articles. And there's a blog write-up by Ari Herstand. He is very knowledgeable in the independent artist world. And he goes, I want to say he takes 15 of maybe 12 or 15 of the distributors and literally compares them. And then there's a graph and it tells you all the fees, all the percentages, if they offer label services, they're all on there. The performing rights organizations, go to BMI, ASCAP, and just see what they offer. And then just, again, go online Google and YouTube is going to be your best friend. And a lot of for example, we're on this seminar now, there's a ton of these resources online, that you can just kind of click into, go to YouTube, and they really dive the intricacies of publishing, co-publishing, all the distributors in terms of TuneCore versus CD Baby or AWOL or STEM. But again, there's a lot of these articles online that do great comparisons on that. So when I say research, it's the internet's going to be your best friend. And a lot of independent artists, and I have a lot of good friends. I'm how did you learn on this? It's all self-taught. It's internet is your best friend. It's the best resource out there. A lot of, musicians teach themselves that way. DJs, one of my good friends, he taught himself DJing, all on YouTube. Literally the internet will be your best friend. I swear to God. Yeah.
Well, thank you. And thank you for being patient. Sometimes I make you pick a question.
You're good. You're good. I did. So again, think like a manager. This goes in the beginning. You got to wear multiple hats. You got to know your rights. You got to know if you're getting taken advantage of or not. Because that's the biggest deal. People are signing these bad deals because they don't know any better. Neither do their managers, or they're not even reading the fine print, or maybe they don't even have their best intentions for their client, or maybe they have too many clients and they're just getting lazy with reading the fine print, reading the contracts. So really play the role. Even if your manager's yeah, this contract's good, read the contract. You might, not want to read all that boring vernacular, but it's when I sign a lease to my apartment, I still read those contracts. It makes no sense, but I don't care if I'm signing something, I'm going to read it. That's all I got to say. Before you sign anything, read it. Read it. Double dipping knowledge. That's basically, the best way I can explain it. So say you have a Starbucks and then another Starbucks opens right next door. You're essentially cannibalizing. You're taking away from here. And it's a lot of labels. They have, again, as spoken about earlier, that 84% fee that they're taking. And then they're also asking for random other fees that are hidden. And if you ask them for the paperwork, a lot of times they're going to run around and they're not going to tell you, or the manager, because if you're signed with the label, a lot of times you won't pick your team. They'll give you the business manager that signed or that's on a salary with the company. Same thing with their publicist and all of that. And then if they ask you for a side percentage, don't do it. That's literally double dipping. They're already getting a salary from these labels. And same thing, if you're an indie artist, just know if your manager, like it's a 20%. I mean, you guys are gonna, it's 15 to 20%, 20% is most normal. And I'm saying this because I know someone that kind of had a bad breakup with his manager. You know, he was double dipping. You know, he's already getting 20% off of this, but then he was kind of sneaking these fees and these percentages. So when I say watch out for double dipping, learn your finances, look at the books. That's all I got to say. Just make sure that like everything makes sense. And if you have a question, ask. Just always ask. You got to have people skills. I get it. Some people are introverts, especially in the creative field. But in order to be a successful indie artist, you're going to have to network. And internet obviously makes it a lot easier these days. You can network through email, reach out, say, hey, I'm an artist looking for a sync placement. It's very relative to the type of music you've been playing with your last project on season X or whatever. So being personable and kind and knowing how to retain these relationships and maintain them, because you never know when you're going to need them down the road, especially as an independent artist. It's huge, because these are connections that you don't have to pay for. You don't have to pay a fee for, a commission for. It's just you being like a good person or knowing how to communicate is huge. Submitting yourself, again, this is something that a label would do. These are label services, but these are things you're going to have to do. But learn how to submit yourself. They're getting thousands of submissions a day. And if it looks like spam, like they're not even going to. And if it even, like online, there's an algorithm. And even if their browser on their end reads the email and encrypts it as spam, they're just going to put it to the spam folder because they're getting thousands of emails a day. So definitely personalize it. Do your research. IMDb is great. So as I was saying earlier about sync placements, say like you make music that's, would be on like a John Wick trailer, for example. You would do your research, see who does the music for that film. There's going to be a lot of supervisors, but there's usually one executive music supervisor, or at least a couple. Just again, Google, and you go and it tells you who does it, and then you kind of research their work, and then either go to LinkedIn or their Instagram or Facebook, or if you find their email, a lot of times that's hidden, but if you can find it, specialize the subject line. And then when you write the email, use their name and be like, I really love the work that you're doing on the John Wick films. I make music that is very relative to the type of stuff that you're making placements for. And before even sending a link, ask first. That kind of shows a little bit more respect. It's kind of like, do you mind if I send you some music? And a lot of times they respond to that a lot more. So definitely don't cold pitch, and don't copy and paste every email. Definitely do the research, drop their name, drop a couple projects that their music's been on. And I'm saying syncing because it's huge. And again, with touring down, like for quick checks, sync placements is great. And also it's a great way to create awareness. Going back to what I spoke about earlier, the Shazam effect. Like, I can't tell you how many times I'm watching a show or a movie and I Shazam a song, and it's amazing, but Shazam's literally like your best friend. So if you get placed, and let's say you literally have 2,000 followers on Spotify, but you send out a killer pitch email to a sync supervisor and they're like, okay, yeah, I kind of like your stuff. And then they put you on a show or a trailer or a commercial, and then you get synced or you get Shazammed, like the numbers, like it's crazy. I put an article in the resources about the Shazam effect as well. Definitely recommend reading that. So when I say think like a manager, like do that in terms of the business sense, but when writing the email, like really kind of put your creative heart out there, and kind of like, no one understands your art like you do. So when you're pitching that, let them know, but don't make it too long, because then, they got ADD for sure. Creative problem solving, you're going to come up with a lot of problems. For example, say you have a song that's going to be released like on Spotify, and all the local DSPs, a lot of times there's going to be like broken links. And right now, like with everything down, there is so much music getting pumped out that these people on the other end, like distribution, like they are so backed up. Just talking to a girl who works for CD Baby, she's like, we can't keep up with the amount of music. So you're going to come up across problems like that, because you're going to have to reach out to them and be like, hey, like my single literally drops in 24 hours and this link isn't working, XYZ isn't working. You're going to have to, you know, come up with a solution rather than panicking. But my theory is like, if you act cool, it'll be cool. Usually it always works out that way. But definitely always be ready for something to not work out. Like it's inevitable. Like it's just going to happen. It sucks, but just think like, you know, just think, how would I fix this? Reverse engineer that problem, you know? Overseeing day-to-day operations. Again, this will go like, say you're in high school and you finally, you know, you booked an open mic night at a cafe. You know, you have to coordinate with the owner of the cafe, your sound guy, mic guy. You have to do all of that because obviously you don't have a full team. You're probably not even going to have a manager at that point, or if you have a friend like probably helping you out, that's awesome, but you're going to have to learn how to communicate what you need. Like there are a lot of introverted artists out here and they don't really know how to express when they're like freaking out. Like they go from 0 to 100 real quick. So just like, you know, again, if you show that you can really have composure when creating, like you're setting it up, you're putting it together, you're doing mic check, you're doing sound check, you're doing all that, and you're performing, and you're breaking it down, and in a very cool, calm, collected manner, like that, people will notice that, and they will remember that. And then again, it's always like like, oh, he was so great to book, XYZ. So don't be too proud to like pick up the wires off the floor. Like they're your wires playing the music, you know, like just be cool with it. Also, does that, when it says create a folder of assets, it'll make easier for it to find. Just your photo, like your headshots, your photo shoots, video stuff. You guys are playing around with your iPhone. You did like a quick little music video in your garage or whatever, like do it. Who was someone, can't remember who it was. They did like their full music video, like on their iPhone, and their song was like in the top Billboard 100. And like, it might be a little project and you can even learn how to edit, like learning how to edit, again, think like a business person rather than outsourcing to a videographer because you probably don't have that budget yet. Play around with it with your buddies and on your phone, work on it, edit it, and then put it on an asset folder, like put it on your videos, and then you have your photography, and then you have your waves or your SoundCloud links or whatever it is. Now that I said SoundCloud, when you do pitching, syncing, they really like SoundCloud links because it's literally one click and go. But yeah, just make sure you have a folder of assets that you can just copy and paste in an email or send out as an attachment. It makes life so much easier. And speaking on design, having a website, there's so many, Wix.com, you can make a website in like 5 minutes and for like free. Where people can actually go to. You might be a junior in high school, but be like, oh dang, this kid has a website. Like he's legit. Like, you know, like that's huge. And you can literally be like, oh yeah, like you don't even have to tell them it was a copy and paste template. Like no one has to know that. So the more you like have structured within who you are as an artist, like the more believable you are to sell to other people. Like, again, you might be coming into the music industry and you might think you might be too young. But again, Billie Eilish was 14 years old when she put out Ocean Eyes. And like, so anything is possible. So just make sure like you have all your ducks in a row, and having a website with your links and your Spotify stuff or your SoundCloud stuff, that's huge. Have a little bio, works wonders. Rejection. You're going to get a lot of that. A lot of us don't know. We still don't know how to respond to rejection. Like they didn't have almond milk for my latte today. And I kind of felt some type of way. Like rejection, we just don't We don't take it well. But it's going to happen, especially in this industry, like, and it all the time, guys, all the time. You have to be resilient with rejections. Like the easier you hear no's and you're like, they don't know what they're doing. Like it's going to be easier to pitch. You're going to be more confident with who you are, your music, your project, whatever it is. Because if you present yourself with confidence, like, you know, they'll be like, okay, like this, yeah, I totally believe you. But if you go in shoulders down, like even I can read an email and know when this kid's shoulders down and be like, oh man, that's a terrible email. You know, you gotta believe in it. Like if you don't, they won't. You gotta understand, why were you rejected? You know, not necessarily, maybe they didn't even open the email, but you just have to, again, think like a manager, think like a business person, think strategy. If you were rejected, why would you be rejected? And you kind of look at your email, see the grammar, see the vernacular used. Maybe your website was, you know, the Wave link or the SoundCloud link, like was the music like kind of choppy, or like what was it? Try to figure it out. Get opinions. Opinions is the best thing. You know, send it out to like family, friends, you know, get their input and be like, hey, like I sent out this email and they gave me like a big no, or like they just didn't respond. You know, getting input and being open to constructive criticism is the best way to move forward. If you can't take constructive criticism, it's over. Like, because that's going to go back to like, you get mad and be like, oh, like, this producer was like, oh, you should probably change this. And then you flip out, that producer's not going to want to work with you again. And it's so easy to get blackballed in this industry where it's like, oh yeah, no, this kid had a terrible attitude, tantrum, whatever it is. So definitely keep your composure. Rejection is inevitable. Be open to constructive criticism, because when you take that constructive criticism and you really put it into play, the puzzle pieces are slowly going to come together. It's going to make more, and be like, oh yeah, I never even saw it from that perspective, you know, or I never, you know, creatively thought of that. Maybe if I implement this criticism and this criticism and put them together with what I already have, it'll be like a completely different thing, but something better. But yeah, like rejection, I feel like is a huge key to success. We're all going to have it. It's just kind of how you cope with it. You got to use the implement changes on delivery and outreach. I already kind of spoke about that in terms of the email, same thing. And again, with the following, I'm going to kind of combine these two. The response isn't necessarily, no response necessarily isn't a rejection, because again, their inboxes are flooded with, you know, whether it's like a label or A&R or manager or like an event or sync placements, they're getting tons of emails. So don't assume that it's in a rejection. There's also, there's an app, there's multiple ones. Like I use GMass. So you can send out like some emails and then it'll kind of show you who didn't open the emails. So it'll make it easier rather than like constantly sending out again. But say you didn't get a response, I would say about a week. Be kind of cool, calm, and collected with the follow-up email. Be like, hey, I know you're probably busy. Obviously username, using first name basis is really good. You personalize it that way. Be like, hey, John, I know you're probably busy. Sent you an email last week. Seeing if you had a chance to like open it, whatever. Just do a follow-up email. Don't be pushy. Give it about a week. And then again, wait. And then if you don't hear again, wait about a month and then do another follow-up email. And then if you don't hear it, you're rejected. No, I'm kidding. But if you don't hear another follow-up email after that month, I would say just cool it. Because they're probably busy, or they probably are like, no, it's not going to work out. But yeah, again, rejection's huge. It's how you take it. If I don't get an email back, I'm like, okay, there's so many things out there that you should never focus on that one. And again, don't be too spammy. I spoke on that earlier. Yeah. So obviously, you know, these artists, you got Chance the Rapper, Frank Ocean, Lauv, and FKA Twigs. Those are like some super popular indie artists that made it without a label. Well, give or take. Since I said that, I'll start with Frank Ocean. So he like finessed the music industry. And what I mean by that, he was originally in a deal with Def Jams, and he kind of had a bittersweet relationship with them. They kind of told him like, okay, like we'll let you put music out. And then they're like, nah, never mind. And then he got mad that he put out a single, and that single did really good. And then he was like, all right, we'll let you put something out again. And they're like, nah, never mind. And so he was like creatively getting annoyed, and understandably so, but everything he put out, people were loving. So he's putting out, they were going to shelve Boys Don't Cry, which is also the name of his indie label. But he wanted to get out of his deal, and he still had to give them one more project. And that one project was exclusive. It was endless. It was streamed. And that got him out of his deal. The very next day, like literally the very next day, he released the album Blonde exclusively with Apple Music. Had he released that song, because he obviously had that project the entire time, he just didn't want to give it to Def Jam because obviously they were going to take all the money. Had he stayed with Def Jam, I think, he probably would have made, I want to say it was like $363,000 or something like that. But he exclusively released it with Apple Music, and Apple Music, they kind of fronted him $2 million for the project. So that's when he released Endless. And so he released that, and he got, instead of getting like 17% of his project, he basically got 70%. So for example, like imagine getting 70% on 5 mil. I mean, and I want to say it was north of like 20 mil or whatever, but let's say you're making 70% off 5 million compared to 17%. So he won huge. So when he did that, literally most of the labels cut, because they used to do exclusive deals with streaming services. So after he did that, his label in particular was pissed. And they were basically like, we're not doing any more exclusive deals with streaming services, because basically he cut out the label of like 20 mil essentially, and he pocketed it. So there are instances where, artists like that, they have been in turmoil and they're like, you know what, the label thing isn't for me. They're inside of it. But he was thinking like a manager. He was thinking like a business artist. And he's like, what do I need to do? He read his contract. He read the fine print. And he was like, okay, like I'll give them this visual project that I want to say was like, about 2 hours long. He was like, that project alone, this kind of dives deep. So it was just him, music produced, the visual project Endless. It was him, he was out. And what I mean by that, a lot of times when a contract says you owe me one full album and then the contract is void, a lot of times, again, you have to read the fine print and be like, you had to have 100% of the album. But for easy math, let's say an album has 10 songs, and then each song has 4 people on it. Then you divide each song by like 25, 25, 25, 25. So one song, you only own 25%. And say that equation is across all songs, and that album's done, you've essentially only given them like 2 or 3 songs. And so within the contract, it says one full album to be completed is 10 full songs. So with all the splits, he's technically only owns like 3 songs. But with Project Endless, it was a visual project and it was just him. So basically he gave him 100% of that project. And so that was kind of what voided him out and completed that, or not voided, but completed that contract. And that's how he was free to release Blonde, because he was 100% paid in full to the label. So again, there are people that go from labels to indies. Then there's Chance. Obviously, everyone knows Chance the rapper. He's like probably one of the most brilliant guys from Chicago. One of the things that people kind of praise him for and how he kind of did it so well, not only is he really smart mentally, obviously, because, you know, he's super successful, but he was very relatable to his fans. He understood his market. He understood his image. He understood, you know, if he was going to pivot, it wasn't going to pivot from fan base. It was going to pivot from like a creative project type. So for instance, like his dad, I forgot what role it was, but Obama asked his dad to basically work for Obama. And so that next album, it was very much an album that was catered to like, you know, his community, his people, and, you know, it was very well received, and it's because he understood, you know, his client base, the people that listen to his music. And that's the biggest thing. A lot of people, they just put out, they're trying to throw out music to see what sticks. Like, they don't care what genre it is, what fans like it. Like, they're just shooting out music to see what sticks. But especially learning young, like, okay, I like this music, or this is my image, this is my brand, this is who I want to make music for. Like, he knew that from the jump, and he is still Chance today that he was like 10 years ago. Like, his brand and image and morals and values have not shifted, and that's why, you know, he's here to stay, and he remains independent. And so, you know, I love it when I see that, because he kind of really gets it. But it also, again, you could just research him and you'll just get a lot of articles, and he's done a lot of like interviews and stuff, and kind of touch base on how to be a successful DIY musician. So he's a great look up in terms of resource. Lauv, he is with AWOL. He's super successful. There's a good podcast on Spotify. It's on my resource page. I can't remember. There's so many podcasts, but on one of them, just type in Lauv. His manager's on there, and basically describes how they really utilized AWOL, the distribution. And going back to the beginning of the conversation, how do you really execute that? Like, AWOL was obviously, he did the research. AWOL was good for him in terms of offerings, in terms of pricing per albums, or if it was a commission or a fee, label services, payment splits, all of that. And his manager wore many, many hats. And you'll hear her talk about, she's like, yeah, I do everything. But that's what is important. He understands that, like, and she understands that. And so they were basically, it was her, and then she was in communications with AWOL a lot. So they were doing a lot of like collaborative stuff in terms of promoting Lauv. And he's, again, a newly successful independent artist, and he's just with AWOL. And then FKA Twigs, she was young, she's still independent. I like her. She's like, doesn't change. Same thing for Chance. Like, she has her image and she's just true to herself. I think she's with someone now, but for the longest time she was independent. And I love it, especially when women remain independent. Because, you know, I feel like they kind of get taken advantage of the most. So when you see a female in the game really getting it, I love it. Yeah. So those are the resources. There's a ton. So all of these resources, I would definitely say, look at it. You're going to read one of these articles and you're going to like highlight something and then right click and say definition. And then you're going to open another link and research that. It's going to be a rabbit hole. Like, there's days where I'm just like, because I'm very curious about like entertainment law, and it'll be like 7 hours. And I'm like, oh my God, I just started, I don't even know with a word. So you can definitely get lost in this, but it's very good information, and it's fun information because it's an entertainment. So it's really good reads. And on the bottom one with the soundsessionstudio.com, like, those are basically the ones, the chapters and pages that I highlighted, but there's like a lot of numbers on there. So obviously I think that's like a really good resource. And obviously Ari's Take, I'm sure you've heard his name a lot, or Ari Hurston, his podcast, Ari's Take, and his book are like, especially coming up young, he dissects everything very, very well. And I think it's like a must read. But yeah, that's all I have for now.
No, very cool. Thank you so much for your time so far. Of course, I let us go a little long because I think what you're saying is very valuable. So we'll take some time for some questions. And then, even though we're a little over time, I still can kind of
sorry.
Go back and forth. No, that's not your fault. So,
hey, Crystal. I had a question.
Hey, yeah.
Hey, so like, thank you also for all the information you've been sharing. I know I've been in and out on video, but I've been here, I've been like keyed into everything. I guess I have a question, like understanding that as like, for example, indie artists, you know, like playing the manager, wearing the manager's hat also, and being, you know, super, I guess like well-researched and just like onto everything that's happening in the industry. But also like when you're getting your music out there, do you think you should be focusing mostly on like the music itself, or for example like branding and like having the message, you know, surrounding your artistry like shown online, especially right now where it's like, you know, you have to have something that like puts you apart, that sets you apart from everyone else? Do you think that we should be focusing mostly on the music, or, you know, together it should be the same, or like branding and just like your image?
I think it's the same, because a lot of people, what makes music stick is the story, you know?
Good. Okay. So basically we should be just doing it at the same time, making sure like your social presence, everything is up to par to the music that you're trying to release, the message you're trying to convey to the audience.
Absolutely. Without a social presence, there's no awareness. And there's no awareness, you know, music can't grow. Yeah.
I mean, as you mentioned, like also like Rejection, I was just starting to think about that too. Like, you know, you're sending your stuff out there, and I'm sure that, you know, execs are like probably checking also your Instagram. They're checking every little thing about like an artist online. So I just wanted to make sure like people understand, at least for myself, I'm a singer-songwriter myself, and I'm like always putting a lot of pressure on myself for like making sure I clean up Instagram, making sure like, you know what I mean, Instagram looks like what I'm singing. And it's always a hard thing, but I just wanted to get your input on that. So thank you.
Yeah, of course.
I feel like I talk a lot, but I'm gonna ask a question really quick. The Shazam effect. I love Shazam. I use it a million times because I remember music, but I never remember songs. I mean, the bank is thick. So, but I had no clue or even thought about the fact that somebody has access to that information. Is there something special we have to do to get access to Shazam information?
Oh, like you can go to the desktop and you go to Shazam.com and it'll show you can type in the region and it'll show you the top Shazams in that region. And so within that, you know, you can kind of allocate like what songs, what genre is very good. And then you can implement that into your neighboring like cities.
Oh, thank you for that. That's very cool.
Yeah.
All right, let's see if we have any further questions. We got time for a few more. I have a long list of questions, but I'm trying not to make sure don't monopolize the time. Because there are a couple questions that in general, we like to ask everybody that comes. And while people think if they have any other questions, how did you find your way to arts, I guess is what it is. If it was music, what got you to the craft itself? Was it music? Was it dance? What is it that kind of got you to the arts, to positive form of expression? Like, what was it for you?
It was music. I love music. It's definitely like, it's a game changer. All I hear is like beats in my head. I'm not a performer. Like, I hate being in front of the camera. But behind the scenes, like, I would always be like, you know, hanging out with the friends in the studio. They would be on tour and I'd be hanging out, and, you know, but I was in business and strategy, but just not I think I was just, you know, too nervous to do it. And then finally I was like, because again, like entertainment, it's like a huge thing, but I was like, if I don't do it, you know, So then, and my friends were always like, dude, just do it, just do it, just do it. So then finally I just pivoted and I went from casting and then I went into music. And it's just because, again, music is kind of like my medicine. And I really respect the people that create it. So it's like with that, you know, I see how they get taken advantage of. And it's like, I kind of wanted to protect the people that make something that calms me. And especially because I have friends that are in the arts and I respect them and I see their creative process. And it's like the amount of work that goes into like just even a music video or the visuals and cover art for a single is like crazy. I was like, man, I thought you copied and pasted that. And it's like, no, like it's crazy. And I have mad respect for them. So it was like, I'm going to come into the game because I want to help people like them, you know, kind of like elevate that resource.
No, thank you. Now, I really, really enjoy this series because, you know, I believe as well as a lot of the team, the Department of Sound believes that, you know, education and empowerment is just a way to really give our youth a chance to really come into their own. And what I like so much about your dialogue and what you gave today is that, you know, if we gave these 13 to 15, 18-year-old kids that check this stuff out, you know, you really fed them today. You know, they can, if they wanted to dig in, they would have some resources and some ideas to really go ahead and push themselves. So I'll thank you a million times for what you do share with us. And I'll thank you for them because they don't even realize yet. But it's incredibly power to put this stuff in a 13-year-old's hands when they have the world, the time to do this stuff. And they're so much better at researching this stuff than we are anyway. They have a chance, you know. So with that, because we are running, I'm a little late, and it's probably time for us to go ahead and check out. I do want to thank you again, Crystal Saldana. Thank you so much for your information. This was Industry Insight, where we try to empower youth through connecting them with professionals. Thank you guys very much for coming out, and we'll check you out the next time we're here.